My name's Jesse and I make a living doing strange jobs. That's the simplest way to say it. Online, people would tag it as urban exploration or haunted tourism, but that doesn't really cover it. Folks call me when they don't want the police involved, or they can't involve anyone else. If a landlord in Tokyo needs someone to spend the night in a cleansed, haunted apartment to prove it's safe to rent again, that's me. If a family's backyard grave starts sinking too fast after a quiet funeral, and they want someone to sit out there all night in case the soul gets restless, that's me too. Most gigs come through message boards, private DMs, the occasional Craigslist listing. I've walked into houses with blood baked into the ceiling, documented basements chained shut from the inside. Slept in motels where the clerk handed me 2 keys in case the one they left behind doesn't work. People say you can't live off this kind of work. They're right, in the normal way. I don't have a mortgage, my truck is older than it should be, but I keep gas in the tank, food in my bag, and I always manage to find a roof when I need one. It's an unstable life, but it's rarely boring. Forced minimalism with a side of adrenaline. My specialty is places. Spots nobody wants to go, but nobody can quite leave alone. Murder houses. Abandoned gas stations where a guy saw lights in the sky back in '84 and never made it home. Tunnels with no blueprints. Barns locked from the inside. Lakes that never showed up on any map. The kinds of places where, if you say the right name in a diner 5 towns away, someone drops their fork and mutters, "Nobody goes there anymore." That's where I go. I keep a tiny blog that's oddly active. On Reddit, I post as FieldManual07. If you've seen it, you already know what I do. If you haven't, skip it unless you're okay losing some sleep. My audience is small but loyal, people who read every police report and then ask what didn't get filed. They send tips. The best jobs usually arrive in my inbox as a blurry screenshot and the words, "You'll like this one. I didn't get into this to become a YouTuber." Good thing, because I barely know which button turns a camera on. I have the blog and that's enough. I do this because I've always loved strange, unexplainable things. I was that kid. If a teacher said, "Don't open that door," I had it halfway open before they finished the sentence. I always assumed I'd outgrow it. Instead, I grew into it. My parents were thrilled about that, as you can imagine. My most devoted supporter is my dog, man's best friend and very much mine. His name is Barney. I got him as a kid, back when my life was just school, Saturday morning cartoons, and whatever drifted through my head. He was a tiny rescue then, 2 big paws, needle teeth, and I named him after the first show that came on Nickelodeon that afternoon. My parents said it could have been worse. I guess they were just relieved I didn't go with SpongeBob. He grew fast, a shepherd mix, according to the vet. Big enough to make strangers think twice, but gentle in that old-fashioned way where he checks on you every few minutes to make sure the world hasn't shifted while his back was turned. When I started exploring strange buildings and spending nights where the police tape was still crinkled on the floor, Barney came along. Not because I wanted him in danger, but because he refused to stay behind. If I packed a bag, he sat on it. If I stepped outside, he was at my heel. After enough arguing and a few failed attempts to leave him with my parents, I gave up. He goes where I go. I trained him as best I could, not to attack, never that, but to alert. To sniff out what I might miss, to warn me when something feels off, to stay close and stay calm. He wears a purple bandana because it makes people smile and assume he's softer than he looks. Truth is, he's my partner. He listens better than most people I've worked with, spots details I miss, and never asks why we're driving into nowhere at midnight. Most of my work happens far from city streets, abandoned houses, dead service stations, forgotten motels with doors no one can unlock anymore. Some clients want proof a place is safe enough to sell. Others just want someone to walk through a space that scares them, even if they won't call it fear. Once, a landlord in Tokyo paid me to sleep in an apartment after a priest had cleansed it. My job: stay until sunrise, record anything unusual, and make sure nothing followed me out. People worry about strange things. I've learned not to laugh at any of it. Every location has a reason behind the request, a rumor at least, often a history. Old mining towns are a standard call. Built too fast on bad ground, stories cling to them, collapsed shafts. People disappearing. If someone tells me there's a half-buried town under a skin of dust and the locals won't go within a mile of it, odds are that's where my next contract is. Then there are Cold War leftovers, bunkers, research sites, locked steel doors nobody was supposed to open again, and yet somehow someone does, a break-in. Lights where no power should run. A dead place suddenly humming. Then someone with more money than answers hires me to sleep inside, map everything, and make sure nothing dangerous woke up with it. The job I'm on now is one of those. A half-dead mining settlement with a long list of missing people, and a bunker not far off that's been quiet for decades, until recently. I don't know if those two stories intersect. But somebody out there thinks they might, and they paid me to go find out. They want eyes on both. Before I go further, there's something I should explain. I don't walk into these places blind. I've been doing this long enough to know that if you treat it like a joke, or worse, like a thrill ride, you don't last. You go missing, or you get hurt, or you become the subject of those forum threads that start with, "Hey, whatever happened to that guy? I'm still around because I stick to my rules." I wrote them when I was younger, after the first few jobs went sideways. At the start, they were just messy thoughts on scraps of paper, scrawled at 3 in the morning. Over time, they sharpened. I watched what happened when I bent them even slightly, and decided I wasn't interested in repeating any of that. There are 4 rules. I don't take a job unless I can follow all 4. If I can't, I walk, no matter how good the money looks. If you're thinking about getting into this field, listen carefully. Rule 1, get permission whenever you can. If you can't, apologize later. That rule has 2 sides. One is legal. The other is the part everyone laughs at. Most abandoned places aren't truly free. They look empty, but they belong to someone. Buildings rot, fences line, roofs cave, but the deed still sits in a drawer somewhere. A corporation might own it and forget it. An heir might have inherited a problem and never bothered fixing it. A city might hold the title after unpaid taxes. Either way, if you walk in without permission, you're trespassing. Trespassing comes with fines and cuffs. I learned that fast. Early on, I assumed abandoned meant nobody cares. Turned out, plenty of people care when they notice a stranger creeping around structures with their name on the paperwork. Now I check ownership every time. Public records, business filings, county databases, anything. If I find an owner, I reach out and explain who I am and what I do. It sounds weird, but a lot of them are relieved someone's paying attention. Some ask for my footage afterward, some say no. If the no looks firm and the line is bright, I walk. Getting arrested in front of a collapsing house is bad for business. The other side of the rule isn't about law, it's about respect, or habit, or both. That part comes from my grandfather. He was the most superstitious man I've ever known. He grew up in rural Hungary and brought all of that folklore with him when he immigrated. Every trail, broken shed, and empty field was, to him, already occupied by something older than people. He never stepped into a place without announcing himself. He'd say his name out loud, state his purpose, and wait before crossing a threshold. He taught me to copy him. When I was a kid, I thought it was just another of his quirks. He had plenty. He believed the Fae loved honey more than anything, that they stayed in forgotten spaces because they preferred quiet over noise. Abandoned buildings, he said, were perfect for them. Nobody bothered them there. If you go into someone else's home, he told me once, even if you cannot see them, you tell them why. He said it with such weight that I never argued. Years later, when I started walking into my own strange places, his voice came back. Now, before I enter any site, I follow his old routine. I stop at the entrance. I say my name. I explain why I'm there and what I'll do. I ask to come in, then give it a moment, even though I don't expect an answer. Then I step over the line. I do this in places that have been empty for 50 years. I do it when there's nothing but dust, raccoon droppings, and bad insulation inside. I do it when other people are with me and mutter jokes under their breath. I also bring offerings the way he did. I keep tiny jars of honey in my pack. Nothing ornate, just enough to leave on a sill or by the door. My grandpa always said honey was a sign of goodwill. They see your intentions, he'd say. Give something sweet when you enter and they will not chase you out. I don't take that literally, but I still carry the jars. They're small, light, and they keep me tethered to the man who taught me how to look at the world. Other explorers notice. Documentary crews, thrill-seeking kids, guys with brand new cameras, they all react the same. They snicker when I talk to empty doorways. They laugh harder when I leave a honey jar behind, like I'm feeding invisible stray cats. But I've watched something they haven't. They trip, they wrench ankles, they punch through weak boards. They skid on rotten stairs, they breathe in something nasty and end up coughing in the ER with cuts and sprains and fractures. Me, I walk out in one piece, no broken bones, no hospital visits. Not once on a job. Maybe it's luck. Maybe announcing myself forces me to slow down and stay aware. I don't pretend to know. I just know that when I follow that rule, things go smoothly. When people ignore it, things go wrong. Barney and I have hauled more than one idiot out of a floor they fell through, and sometimes there's no living owner. Records vanish, titles get lost. The building outlives everyone tied to it. In those cases, I follow the second half of the rule, apologize later. If someone shows up angry, I stay calm. I explain what I'm doing. I show my research. I offer to leave. Most people cool off when you don't meet their heat with more of your own. Rule 1 doesn't just protect my body, it protects the work. It keeps the process steady when the environment is anything but. It reminds me I'm stepping into someone else's story, not dragging mine on top of it. That's why it's first. You never really know whose home you're walking into. Try to be a decent guest. Rule 2 is simple. Take nothing but photos. Leave nothing but footprints. Most explorers treat it like a slogan. You see it on message boards, sprayed across rusted water tanks, stenciled on the back of old jackets. For them, it just means, don't be an idiot. Don't smash windows, don't tag walls, don't dump your trash, and above all, don't steal. I learned what that rule really means by watching someone break it. His name was Danny. Danny and I worked together once in a while. We weren't close, but we got along. He had a growing YouTube channel about abandoned places and big plans to turn it into a career. He moved fast, talked fast, always chasing the next eye-catching shot. I liked him even if I didn't match his pace. Barney liked him too, which mattered more. My dog is cautious with strangers, but he took to Danny quickly. On shoots, Barney would trot after him, sniffing whenever Danny pointed at something, tail wagging whenever Danny paused long enough to scratch his ears. It made the work lighter seeing my dog approve. We met up at an abandoned hospital one overcast afternoon. 3 stories, hollow halls, paint peeling like old sunburn. Barney walked ahead, checking rooms before we entered them, always looping back to bump my leg. The anatomy wing sat on the top floor. Most cabinets had been looted years earlier, glass broken, contents scattered, but a few shelves still held old equipment. That's where Danny found the skull. It was tucked on a back shelf, set down like someone had meant to return to it and never did. He picked it up with both hands, turned toward his camera, and started speculating on its worth. Barney froze. He lowered his head and backed up until his tail brushed my knee. No bark, no growl, just a tightness in his body I'd never seen directed at a person he liked. Danny laughed. He loved the lens, loved the idea of a big reaction even more. He turned the skull to catch the gray light from a window. "This is going to do crazy numbers. Imagine the thumbnail," he said. I told him to put it back. He waved me off. "It wasn't from a grave," he said. "Abandoned twice," he joked. "Someone online would pay a fortune." He slid it into his backpack. We split in the parking lot. Barney jumped into the truck before I even had the door open. I watched Danny cross the cracked asphalt, pack bouncing, camera thumping against his chest. That was the last time I saw him alive. A few months later, I'd moved on to other jobs. Then on a Monday morning, my phone rang. Local PD from that same town. They asked if I knew a Daniel Reyes and if I could come in. They found Danny on the hospital roof, not in the building, on top of it, floating in the old water tower basin that had been dry for decades. His shoes were neatly placed at the bottom of the ladder, side by side, like he'd taken his time lining them up. No signs he'd slipped, no drugs or alcohol in his system, lungs clear. No bruises on his arms or shoulders, and his hands didn't show any sign of fighting for air. But his right ear was gone, torn off. That's the phrase in the report. The coroner said it was strange to see a wound that violent on a body with no other resistance marks. They searched the roof, the grounds, everywhere, never found the missing ear. They ruled it an intentional drowning brought on by psychological distress. He'd left a note in his jacket pocket. The handwriting shook across the page, letters tilting and slipping like his hand couldn't hold steady. He wrote that something had been following him for weeks. He said it had 3 eyes, 3 arms, 3 feet, that it stood behind him when he slept and waited for him to notice, that it never spoke but he could feel it breathing, and that it knew him now. Those were his last words. The detective called it psychosis from a chaotic lifestyle. The lawyers called it a tragic accident. The file closed. I didn't argue. Nothing I said would have changed their conclusion. I nodded, signed my statement, and walked out. Barney stayed quiet for a long time after that. On jobs, he stuck closer. He double-checked doorways before letting me pass. He paused more often, especially in places that felt older. I started trusting his instincts more than my own. Dogs don't explain, but they don't lie. Whatever happened to Danny left its mark on both of us, even though we weren't there when it happened. Now I don't touch anything I don't absolutely need to. No souvenirs, no for later piles. I don't rearrange objects for a better shot. I don't pocket keys or photos or files. When Barney hesitates, we backtrack. If he flat out refuses to move forward, we leave. People still argue about Danny's death online. They call it weird, poke holes in the details. Some say the missing ear is embellishment. Others say the note was faked. It's become one of those unsolved oddities that gets rehashed every few months. Officially, it's still unexplained. Rule 3, never go in alone. Most people think that's about safety, backup plans, basic common sense. They're not wrong. Abandoned structures don't care if you're careful. Floors rot from the inside, ceilings drop. One bad step and you go from a cool story to a search and rescue op that never finds you. But that's not the main reason the rule exists. You need someone or something to keep you awake to where you are, a second set of senses, another mind to tell you when you've stayed too long, someone who can look where you're not looking. For me, that's Barney. We've been doing this together since before money ever changed hands. He's trained to pick up what I miss: movement, scent, drafts, shifts in temperature. He's my confidence in places that feel too still. Talking to him out loud keeps me grounded. An empty hall sounds less strange when your voice has a recipient, even if it's just a dog with half-lidded eyes. Most explorers don't have that. They go solo by choice. Some chase the challenge. Others chase the image, proof of bravery to feed their followers. It's good content. One flashlight beam cutting through a black hallway plays better than two people arguing over camera angles. I see their posts sometimes. GoPro footage from half-collapsed schools, burned-out houses, factories, asylums. They narrate like their audience is trailing them by inches. It looks cinematic right up until you realize a single rotten board could drop them 6 feet into darkness. When I started, I just thought they were reckless. Now I think they're just young. I remember believing the rules were optional, that bad things only happen to other people. You either learn or you don't. Barney is my ears when the wind picks up, my eyes when the light falls, and sometimes my only warning to leave. A single sound from him, a low growl, a whine, even just a full stop, is enough for me to call it. Not everyone follows Rule 3, not even the ones who should know better. One night I ended up at a bar on the edge of a small town, the sort of place where locals and drifters mix because there's nowhere else to go. I just finished a job, a warehouse inspection that turned out to be mostly dust and raccoons, and I was craving a hot meal that hadn't come out of a can. Barney snored at my feet, head on his paws. The bar was half full, a few regulars hunched over their glasses. In the corner sat a cluster of tourists, jackets dusted white, camera bags stacked by the booth. I didn't need to ask what they were. Urban explorers recognize each other on sight. It was summer, our busy season. Made sense to see a whole pack of them. I sat at the bar, ordered, and listened. Eventually, one of them waved me over, and the conversation widened to include me, whether I wanted it or not. They were buzzing about a story they'd heard earlier that day on a hike. Local legend, a mountain north of town where a man vanished years back, except he hadn't vanished alone. He'd gone up with a friend. A blizzard caught them. Only one man came down. When rescuers finally found him, something about him was wrong. Their tone dipped when they got to that part. Voices lowered, but not enough to shut me out. They said he'd eaten his companion to stay alive. Said the land was cursed after that. Said when the rescue team reached him, they didn't find a man anymore, but something else. One of them claimed it had 3 eyes, 3 arms, 3 feet. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. They kept going. People still saw it up there, they said, lurking near the tree line, watching hikers from the ridge, following anyone who whistled after dark. Classic small-town campfire material, they joked. The kind of monster story you give kids so they'll stay close to home. They started riffing on the idea of tracking it down for exclusive footage. The bartender rolled his eyes and told them flatly that kind of talk was bad luck. Locals, he said, didn't go near that mountain, not even in daylight. When they finally noticed me, someone asked what I thought. Did I buy the story? I told them no, then asked where they'd heard it. The tallest one said a ranger at a gas station just outside town. I finished my food, paid my tab, and stepped into the night. Barney got up, stretched, and wagged lazily as we headed out. The air felt too still. Across the road, the woods pressed in, a single dark shape at the town's edge. All the way back to the motel, I kept thinking about that legend. A man who ate his friend in a blizzard and came back wrong. The curse. The descriptions, 3 eyes, 3 arms, 3 feet. It matched Danny's note a little too well. Barney brushed my leg and I glanced down. He trotted along, nose dragging the ground, unconcerned. "Don't worry, boy, not gonna do anything stupid," I told him, scratching behind his ears. I reminded myself that every place has a story. Every explorer collects dozens. This was just another one. Even so, when I got to my room, I checked both locks twice and laid my gear out in neat rows. Barney settled by the door like always, the unofficial security system. I sat on the bed and wrote down what I'd heard, details, names, description. I didn't decide whether it was coincidence or warning. That part didn't matter. I'd learned that ignoring patterns in this line of work has a way of backfiring. Months passed before I heard about that thing again, which brings me to Rule 4, always do recon. It sounds boring compared to the others, I know, it's not dramatic. But it's the one that saved me the most grief. I tell people constantly, don't get hyped until you've seen it with your own eyes. Unless a location is guaranteed to be there, which is rare, I plan a recon run. Like scouting a campsite before you decide to pitch a tent for the night. You don't show up in the dark and hope. I learned that the hard way. Once I spent weeks planning a trip to an old brick factory just outside Columbus. I had maps, drone shots, forum photos. I even talked a friend into coming. We drove out, weaving through back roads, hearts set on red brick ruins and rusted machinery. What we found was a brand new parking lot. They'd demolished the whole site a month earlier. That little adventure cost me gas, lunch, and my friend's patience. It also burned an important lesson into my skull. You can't trust the internet. Photos age fast. A single year can turn a haunted shell into a clean concrete pad. So now I scout every site before making any real plan. Sometimes that means a drive at dawn to walk the perimeter. Sometimes it means asking a nearby shop owner what they've seen. Anything to confirm it still exists, but recon isn't just a headcount on buildings. It's about survival. Newcomers rarely get that. They grab an address off a forum, skim a couple of posts, and think that's enough. They don't check the floors, they don't test the structure, they don't consider flooding or sinkholes or gas pockets. That's how people get trapped or killed. The internet won't tell you the basement flooded last spring. It won't warn you that the lobby floor finally gave out. I heard about 2 explorers who followed an old thread's directions into an abandoned theater. The main floor had collapsed years earlier, but nobody had updated the post. They walked in and dropped straight through. 12 hours later, someone found them, one left with both legs broken. That's why I obey Rule 4 every time. The last time I let it slide, I ended up dragging a stranger out of a bad situation. It started with a message on my blog from a teenager named Nathan. He said he'd found a spot a few towns over, an old office complex shuttered since the 90s, and wanted to know if I'd covered it. He mentioned weird noises and a bad feeling. I hadn't heard of the place. It wasn't on any of my lists, but bad feeling isn't something I ignore. I drove out that afternoon. The building was exactly what you'd imagine, a gray box in the middle of nowhere, half its windows broken. A low fence circled the property, or used to. A fallen tree had flattened part of it. Barney hopped out of the truck and started sniffing along the edge, tail low. I dialed Nathan. His phone rang from inside the complex. That's when I knew he hadn't just been curious, he'd gone in. It took me 20 minutes to find him. A section of ceiling had come down in a hallway, pinning him in a corner between 2 steel beams. Dust coated his jacket. His flashlight lay dead by his feet. He looked scared but unhurt. He couldn't have been more than 16. "Don't move, I'll get you out," I said. The collapse wasn't catastrophic. A metal support beam lay across the doorway, but there was a narrow gap near the top. With leverage, I could shift it. I went back out to grab my crowbar. When I returned, Barney was crouched near the entrance, ears flicking. He didn't growl. He just stared down the dark hall. At first, I didn't see anything. The building hummed with that thick old silence. Then I heard it, a slow, heavy scrape, something dragging. I dropped into a crouch next to Nathan and pressed a finger to my lips. He nodded, eyes wide. Through the gap above the fallen beam, something moved. At first I thought it was another explorer, but the shape was wrong. Its back hunched at an angle that hurt just to look at. It stepped into a bar of light falling from a broken window, and I saw it clearly. 3 eyes set in a row across its face. 3 arms, joints bent in directions that didn't make sense. 3 legs that moved out of sync, like it was borrowing motions from a body that hadn't been built for walking. Worst of all, it had two heads, fused at the shoulders, splitting apart at the torso, as if something that was once single had tried and failed to fully divide. In one of its hands, it dragged a deer carcass, half-eaten, ribs exposed. A dark trail smeared the floor behind it. Nathan's breath hitched. I slapped my hand over his mouth before any sound could escape. Barney had dropped lower to the ground, muscles taut, absolutely silent. The thing stopped near the end of the hall, one head tilted. It sniffed the air, then it turned and shuffled around the corner, disappearing into the gloom. I counted out a full minute in my head before speaking. "Okay," I whispered. "We're leaving." I wedged the crowbar under the fallen beam and threw my weight into it. The metal groaned and lifted just enough for Nathan to squirm through. We backed out and didn't stop moving until we were outside, breathing clean air. I drove him home, handed him off to his parents with a clipped explanation about a partial collapse and bad choices. I didn't mention what I'd seen, not then. A month later, I passed that same lot. The whole area was fenced off. A big sign out front bragged about a future resort. I pulled over and talked to a foreman near the gate. He told me they were already having problems, equipment malfunctioning, workers getting hurt, a small fire with no clear cause. 2 or 3 guys had been in the ER that week alone. Broken bones from equipment failures nobody could explain. A few days passed. The image of that thing dragging the deer refused to leave my head. I told myself I'd done my part. I'd gotten Nathan out alive. Whatever happened on that site now was someone else's responsibility. Then the incident reports kept trickling in. Vanished tools, collapsed scaffolding, a man breaking his leg through a stairwell that had already passed inspection. It felt wrong to know what I knew and stay quiet, so one night I sat down and opened a fresh email account with a name that couldn't be traced back to me. I wrote 3 messages. One to the construction foreman, one to the property owner listed on public records, one to the local police. I told them about the old building, about Daniel Reyes and how he died, about the pattern of injuries since they'd moved in. I included a simple map and a line of advice: don't work there after dark. I didn't use words like monster or creature. I wrote something dangerous, close enough. I stared at those drafts for a long time before sending them. My hands hovered over the keys. I thought about Danny, about Nathan under that beam, about the slick trail that deer had left on the concrete. Then I hit send. Nobody replied, not the foreman, not the owner, not the cops. That was fine. I hadn't expected thanks. I'd done what I needed to be able to sleep. A couple of days after that, I heard the city had stepped in. The whole parcel was officially sealed off by the mayor's order. It's been a few months since the construction site. Barney and I keep moving. We still take jobs, quieter ones lately, smaller and shorter. I'm not out there chasing subscribers. Cameras aren't my thing. I do keep writing though, not for a big audience. Just the small Reddit corner where people like me swap stories and half-believed experiences. My posts are part diary, part habit. I don't share everything, just enough to make sense of the patterns, enough to remind myself why the rules exist. Some readers think I'm making it all up. That's fine. Maybe I am in their world. Lately, I've been hearing about a new place, West Texas, off some half-forgotten highway, where the land slumps into a dry river basin. A few threads mention strange noises at night. Livestock vanishing, search parties losing their bearings in what should be flat, easy country. One hiker posted that he saw something tall moving in the brush, watching. 3 eyes, 3 arms. 3 feet. I don't know if it's the same thing that took Danny, or the one I saw hauling a deer through that office complex, or if there's more than one, but I want to know. I'm heading there next week. Maybe that's reckless, maybe it's stupid. This work doesn't leave you much peace when there are still questions hanging over you. So I'll go with Barney and with my 4 rules. I'll take the rules and I'll take my chances.